time grief we go. Gotta learn to let it go. Once asleep, now awake, feeling every breath you take.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life. Our goal is to create a safe space where our guests can share how they've decided to wake the F up and become mindfulness experts through their own emotional healing journey. Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast. I'm your host, Alix, along with my co-host and husband, David Long. Today we are so excited to welcome back Whitney Lyn Allen. If you listened to our podcast in the past, you may remember we recorded with an episode with Whitney back in July of last year. Gosh, I can't believe it's been that long. We're so happy to have her back. Whitney's a mother, a widow, a best-selling author, and a coach on trauma and grief. Whitney's book is titled Running in Trauma Stilettos. It is an Amazon bestseller. She is also certified grief educator and grief coach. And most importantly, she is a mom of 2 boys, Jackson and Leo. Welcome back, Whitney. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you back. And David is excited to be a part of it. He was definitely a big fan of our last podcast, as was I.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited to have another conversation.
I know. It's always good to get a group of widows together because I think we are a small group of people who are quite like-minded generally. So talk to us a little bit about where you've been, what's been happening in your world since July. I think you had some big stuff. You had a big move. I'm a voyeur on your page, so a big move for you and Anthony and the kids. And I think you're writing again.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like July was a lifetime ago already, but so my boyfriend Anthony and we moved in to a new house in June. So I guess when we talked, we had been like newly moved in, trying to settle into kind of like our new life together. And then since then, I wrote my second book. So my manuscript is done now, and I'm in the process of going to traditional publishers and literary agents to try to get that out into the world at some point in the future. So lots of things. And obviously I've been working full time as a grief coach and working with clients one-on-one. So that's what I've been really busy with since July.
Yeah. You've been busy, huh? And the boys are they both in school or just Jackson?
So they're both, well, I guess Leo's in daycare. So he's just turned 2 in January, and Jackson's in kindergarten, but they both go to the same place because they have a kindergarten program there. So for 1 more year, they'll be in the same building, which makes it super convenient for pickup and everything. So yeah, I know.
I love seeing your Instagram posts. Here's our dog coming in. She has been playing. She's just to get in on the fun. This is Lucy. Hello, Missy. I love watching your Instagram when or when you're dropping the boys off every day. I'm like, Leo is getting so big, and he's like such a big guy with his lunch every day trying to go into school.
I know. He is like an entire vibe. And it's so funny because my oldest, Jack, he was such like a funny toddler as well. And like he's developed so much, and now I feel like he's so grown up. But like as a little toddler, he was so much a vibe. And they're both just like have the most like vibrant personalities.
They really do. I mean, it's actually really cool because I've only known you for, I guess, I've been watching your pages for about 1.5 years, and just to see how much they've grown and changed in the last year has been it's really fun to watch, actually. I'm not like a mom that always documents my kids, but when I watch your page, I'm like, I should more because it's really fun to sequentially just watch how like each week they change a lot.
I know. That's, I think when I do it kind of, I mean, obviously I share a lot with, my following in the world, but it's like so much for me too, because I love looking back and being able to remember some of those moments. Cause it's always the little moments that I think mean the most. It's not like the big stuff. It's like the little things.
It's so funny that you mentioned that. We were in bed last night, and our middle school boys, they're in 8th grade, they jumped in bed with us. And we were going, like, we have these like photo slideshows that go on our TVs, and it was our wedding photos, and it was so crazy to look. That was not even 2 years ago, but the boys, I mean, they looked so little, like they're just growing into like full-blown teenagers. And like just this past year, they look like different like completely different children, which is crazy.
Also, I'm always struck by the apparently universal thing of being a widow is that sometimes the big family things are really hard, you know.
Oh yeah.
But every other day is really amazing, you know, like Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter and all those things are kind of hard, and birthdays and graduations and stuff like that. But Tuesdays are awesome. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I can resonate with that so much because it's like on the big dates that, or holidays or anniversaries, it's like that's when I feel like we go into our grief a little bit more, or a lot more, depending upon what it is. But then and then in your everyday life, it's kind of, you get a little bit of a break from that. I feel like it's less intense.
And you have so much
sure.
like anticipatory grief too. Like I feel like even leading into the holidays, you start to be like, you're anxious about everyone's grief, not just your own, but your kids. And it can be a lot. Yeah. I think that's.
Yeah. I mean, lately for me, milestones have been my kids are kind of late teenagers. So they're starting to hit like high school graduation, and my son soloed. He's flying now. So he soloed. So they're like doing these things that are kind of,
big.
Yeah, they're kind of big. And that reminds me of the tragedy that she's not here to see that. But
I know it can be really hard when you go through those moments, and to not, have your spouse that you created these children with, like there to, those unspoken moments where you're like, oh, I wish you could see them right now because you'd be so proud. Yeah. And even though, it's interesting, I wanted to kind of touch on that. So I was listening to this guy who I'm going to put in the show notes for everybody. His name is Abel Kehoe, who's an author and a widow. And he does this like Wednesdays with Widows YouTube channel. And he's written many, many books, but I don't know how I've missed him, because I feel like every grief book seems to be either sent to me or comes across my lap. But he lost his wife tragically while she was 7 months pregnant. And I actually haven't even read the book. I just ordered it. I found him like literally like a week ago. And so I'm not actually sure if their baby survived or not, but he remarried. So I've been like scrolling his pages, just like watching about his story. But there's so much to be had on his podcast and his YouTube channel about second love. So being remarried or being in a new partnership post being a widow. And I kind of wanted to touch on that today with you, because I thought, and you have such a new beginning, you and Anthony, and at the same time, we're in the same zone, right? Like we're coming up on the anniversary of David's wife's death. She died suddenly on Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day stuff is coming out for everyone, and you can just feel David is like he has these like glazy looks, a lot of times in different moments of the day, and you just know the grief is like creeping back in. And so I was just wondering, like, how has it been for you, establishing this new love and now building a new family, because you guys are living together, bought a house together, like you made some big steps this year together, and we've done the same in the last. We're going on second year, but it's really challenging because, in one hand, you sit with all your grief and it sort of blends inside of you. And then on the other hand, you're really trying to create a whole new family because your old family is completely gone. And so how's that experience been for you?
Oh my gosh, there's so much in that. There's so much to talk about.
I'm interested in like how it's going for you guys settling into this new family and new life.
Yeah, it is so hard. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It is, I see other widows online who I really like following, and they're in new relationships, and I feel like they only share the really good stuff, and I'm like, that doesn't feel authentic to my journey. I'm like, this feels really hard, and I think there's so many layers to it. I mean, first of all, for me, it's like you're parenting with someone entirely different. Like that's a different experience entirely. Also,
sure.
I've never parented with anyone when I had 2 children, because Ryan's accident happened when I was 26 weeks pregnant. So I'm having to navigate figuring out how to be a mom of 2 at the same time that I'm trying to figure out how to parent with an entirely new partner with 2 kids. And it's like, my mind is like blowing up because there's so
hard. David is
which
very
so
different.
hard.
I would say you're a very different discipliner than Carl. Now, Carl was sick with cancer for years, and so I think his parenting style leaned a little more into like what I like to call the Disneyland effect, where he just knew his time was very limited. He was given months to live years before he died, but it just that, it kept being like one more month and one more month and one more month on hospice. And
Mhm.
so when David came in, I was like, it was a little jarring because he's like a normal, healthy discipliner, but my kids and myself both were not used to, I think, normalcy really and normal disciplining, because everybody, when you're in heavy grief, tends to spoil your children. And a lot of times they're like over candied and over this and over loved. And then these boundaries are kind of not there for them. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
that
I
was
mean,
hard.
that resonates with me so much because, well, first of all, I mean, obviously when you are with a new partner, their personalities are completely going to be different. Like, obviously you probably fell in love with David because, he had the same like foundation and like morals and like what all the foundational stuff, but the personality stuff is very different. Like Ryan is
Mhm.
such a different personality than Anthony is. And what you said about like parenting and discipline, like they're two different people when it comes to that. So I had not that like either of them were wrong in like how they parent or how they discipline, but being used to somebody who is different and being able to kind of like accept that those differences and like how do I work around that, because then my role is different then too. If you're disciplining differently, like I can be more of like the nurturer, because Anthony is so like he's a great disciplinarian. Ryan was more like carefree and I was more the disciplinarian. So now I'm having to kind of step back and be like, okay, maybe that's your role because I can now not have to be that. And it's there's an adjustment because I'm not used to that. And I'm not used to my son Jackson like interacting in the same way with Anthony as he did with his dad, which are also really two different things also. And it's not that either one is wrong, it's just different. And I think there's always like a resistance when there's differences because you're like, that's not what I'm used to. Like, that's not what I'm comfortable with. So it's having to be like, just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong and doesn't mean it's bad. It's like, I just have to get used to how I feel about this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest, I mean, it is hard. There's no doubt about it. It's hard, but the truth also, I mean, she always claims that I put the like shiny coating on, but for me as a stepdad, it's hard to describe how wonderful it is to basically have new kids when I'm in my 40s, and
Yeah.
a little bit more secure and definitely emotionally more stable and aware and more mindful and more communicative. And all those things have translated, in my opinion, to me being a better parent, frankly, for my own kids, but also for the kids that I have only known for a couple of years. I'm much
Yeah.
more available and aware, and I can hear their feelings and emotions. No comparison better than I have in my entire life.
Hmm.
Um, and I think what's really worked for Alix and I, because Alix got lucky. She walked into my wife was extreme. My first wife,
I'm scared what's coming.
first wife was extremely hands off. She just kind of let the kids do pretty much whatever they wanted.
Hmm.
Um, that was just her style. My mom used to call it libertarian parenting, um, which which actually just means letting kids make mistakes, which
Uh-huh.
is okay in and of itself. Um, but I think my Betsy took it to kind of the extreme, and we were, busy professionals, and so I think the timing actually for me is kind of better now. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing in my 20s and even my early 30s, and I was super busy building my career,
Hmm.
working a lot, and I'm much more available and really just a basically better parent. And
Yeah.
right about the time that happens, I get the opportunity to have two kids that are
Hmm.
wonderful, and they challenge my preconceived notions about parenting. They
Mhm.
They're really wonderful. They're really wonderful. Alix did a great job.
No,
Um,
that's really sweet.
ha-
That's nice to hear that.
yeah, she did a great job in a few important areas, which is like they really feel comfortable telling you how they feel. Now, that can be
Yeah.
really jarring when it, in my house,
Right.
in my personal house, like as a child, that was not a thing, and
Mm,
it was a little bit more of a thing as a in my house when I was a parent, but not much more. I mean, if
yeah.
they were not allowed really ultimately to tell me how they feel, particularly if it was bad. Like
Scary.
if it was scary, I didn't want to hear it, and Betsy certainly didn't want to hear it, and we just wouldn't allow it to be heard.
Mm,
Whereas I think Alix did a much better job creating a better space, which I've adopted that. I've obviously recognized it as better.
Well, you
Um,
feel better, like even though one of the things I learned, I think I only became in that space, I only came into that space actually through cancer.
right.
And one of the things
mhm.
was like the therapist, and it stuck with me, said, it's not the child that's causing problems that you should be worried about. It's the child that's quiet and not telling you how they
Mm,
feel. So one of my children was she's very loud in the grief process and was acting out in school. Actually, both of them were acting out in school and doing all the things that would have made Carl and I just so anxious, right? We needed them
yeah.
to be in this little box and at this right school and getting right grades and even dressing right, looking right, following this path that I really like. I bought into Carl's path, the path of New Orleans living in the way that we did. And it's a path that worked for a
Mhm.
lot of our friends well. And, when our world shattered, which was diagnosis and then after, I realized that we were, at some point, my kids weren't going to fit in those boxes. And I either needed to get on board and be an advocate for them, right? And the fact that, and I think this is true for a lot of us moms, right, out there. If we have a kid that is, we should let our kids not be in boxes. But if we have a kid that's really outside of the box thinking, you've got two choices. You can press and press and press against that and try to make them who you think they should be because in order you think that's going to keep them safe, but it doesn't work. Like it just makes them
Yeah.
implode more and feel unloved. And so instead of fighting against my oldest's reactions, which were scary and not normal, and society didn't like it, and he was angry as a 9-year-old and acting out and
Mm,
depressed and actually suicidal and like all these things that were like too big for his age according to everyone around me, except for the
yeah.
grief therapist who knew that this was a guy who has big feelings and was losing one of the most important, the most important thing in his life, and
Yeah.
was feeling all of his feelings. He couldn't suppress it. So that was a
Mhm.
long-winded statement, but it's really just like I think at that point I realized if we didn't feel, I should be more afraid of what they were pushing down and how that was going to come out later. And it's just interesting if we don't allow our children to make mistakes and have freedom to feel. I think that they end up hiding from us so deeply, as did we maybe to our parents,
Mhm.
that we really don't have an honest relationship or know them at all.
well, one of the other things that I'm curious
Mm,
if you had the same experience with Anthony is that the whole step thing, the step children, step dad, step mom, it has done something for us that Betsy and I just avoided, which was basically just a conversation on parenting. Like
mhm.
we never really sat down, not even in passing, and discussed how we were gonna do blank or how we were gonna deal with blank. And I think being a
Mhm.
step parent, because you're in this kind of gray zone of, can you discipline? Can you fully love? Do they trust you? I mean, there's all these kinds of questions. It kind of forces you to have the conversation with at
Yeah.
least the partner, if not your kids. And once that conversation starts, you can really start to dig into not just having kids and being a parent, but like being a parent, like raising
Choosing
kids,
how you want to raise them.
and that is a huge difference. I think Betsy and I, probably like a lot of professional couples, um, basically raised our kids as something to get through. Like
Uh-huh. Yeah.
we need to get them through high school. We need to get them through college. We need to get them
Right.
married. We need to, you know what I mean? And
Hit the
so
Yeah.
you
milestones.
kind of miss the whole like what are we doing? We were just kind of biding our time, which is not a
Right.
great way to raise kids. So we were really Betsy and I really were never on the same page with parenting because we never
Hmm.
really talked about it. Now the
Yeah.
kids turned out okay, kind of despite
Oh,
that,
they're wonderful.
but Alix and I are much more intentional parents, I think, than I've ever been
Well, I
before.
think you're probably
Yeah.
experiencing this, right? And especially because you have little kids. So you're still in that process. And it's interesting when I was listening to this YouTube, and it made me think a lot about you was like the guy who was defending must have like they were having a global conversation about defending your new family and how Anthony and David and myself and you are stepping into new roles, right? And new families
Mhm.
and a new life. And that people who have been there for your life prior to, or maybe they're as friends or support system with your previous marriage, generally struggle. And that's okay. That's a part of their grief. But it's like when people give you grief or we get trolls on your Instagram page or people are really nasty about
Mhm.
Anthony's role, it's our obligation as a family to stand up for each other and say, listen, Anthony and Ryan both have valuable roles in this family, but
Mhm.
Ryan passed away, Carl passed away, Betsy passed away, and whether other people they don't know how to absorb that, but we do. And the fact is, like, in order
Yeah.
for us to have a true family, we're the ones here every day doing the work. And like Anthony is the one parenting as a dad role right now. David is the
Yeah.
dad role, and it's a
Mhm.
hard to swallow as us, sometimes, but it's also hard, even harder when you go to school functions and they're like, are you the dad? Are
Yeah.
you the
Oh God. Or
Yeah.
stepdad? Like
the
people in the
forms
world.
that you have to fill out, that
Have you done this? You're
get
probably like, who are
have you done
you?
this? Like where you fill out a form and you don't
Right.
know who are you? Like what, or like Alix hadn't changed her name yet. So,
Mhm.
technically she's still Alix Schubert but we're
Well, we've
married and
got
it's
two
all this,
Schubits and three Longs, and I'm a Long, and they're,
right.
like
And the
everyone's
school's
like, what's
going, who is this
happening?
person? Like when I go to pick up the kids, who are you here for? I'm here for Carr and Kate Schubert. Who are you? William Long. And they're like, you know, I mean, it's just
I'm
so weird
confused.
to have to have to explain to the guard at the school, this, yes,
My wife died, her husband died. Like you're like
right,
always telling this damn story, and at a certain
right.
point, you're like, how do we defend our families in the now while maintaining the love that we have in the past? And I was just wondering, how's that been for you,
Mhm.
and Anthony? I'm sure it's probably met with some challenge, like it has been for us.
Yeah, I think with anything else that we've had to face, it's so complex and there's so many layers to it because like you said, it's we're the ones, we're the spouse, we're the grieving spouse, and we're the one in this new couple, right? No one else is in that space like we are. I think about my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and everyone in Ryan's family. Like they're they're able to see it from a very different perspective than I am because I'm having to complete their lives, although they lost Ryan, like their lives haven't changed in every way. Like I've had to completely rebuild my life and how I operate and how I raise my kids and bringing someone new into the mix. I'm literally living an entirely different life. And
Yeah.
their environments haven't changed, their day-to-day activities really haven't changed. Although they suffered an entirely like tremendous loss, it's just not the same as when you lose a spouse because there's so many secondary losses that other people just don't have to deal with, unfortunately. Um, so it's so complex, and I think I'm so sensitive to how painful it is to see somebody else in a role that Ryan should be playing and in. Um, and I always remind myself, like, if I could change it, I would. And if I could turn back time, I would. And then I wouldn't have ever met Anthony because I would be in a totally different universe and world, but I didn't get that choice. And this is how I'm continuing to live my life. And that's, this feels really authentic to me. And Anthony is such a great partner and he's such a good dad. And he you know, he didn't have to choose us, right? Like, I gave him like every out. I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? Like a million times.
I
Like
think a widow always does. You're like, are you sure you're ready for this?
yeah, I mean, this is a guy, like a young guy, like 34 years old. He was living in his house with a dog, like good career. He didn't need all of this stress. He didn't need all this stress. And then he comes in here and he's like, I'm choosing you guys every day and it's going to be really hard, but I'm choosing this because this is like what I want. Um, and for someone to do that, I mean, that is like just so rare. And I mean, I think it's such a beautiful thing. And I think it is something to defend. So, you know, I think I give people
Absolutely.
grace to get used to him in that role because it is so painful. It is that he is the reminder that Ryan is gone. Like that's what it is. Um, but also I have to balance that with I also have to live my life. So it's like that continuing balance between trying to give people grace and then also wanting them to open up their minds and hearts a little bit and to him, even though it's really hard. Because I know it's not going to be like that fairy tale, like everyone's going to love each other and always get along, but like I want understanding. I want respect. And like I mean, Ryan's family has been wonderful. So, I mean, I'm very grateful for that, but it's a very hard process. Like it's
It is a
very
process for
sensitive.
sure. And you know what? It's a process, I think, that is one thing that can, if everyone's willing to be open minded and committed to staying connected. And that takes effort on, I think, the in laws' parts, right? Because it is a big change, and then we make decisions for what we need for our health and our happiness in our life. And then the whole extended family has to make a decision. Are they going to be supportive? And like I think I got to a place where I was like, if anyone, and it wasn't my Carl's family necessarily, but I was just like, I have to do what's best for me, and anyone who's not on board, because I was watching my children actually blossom and do better, and I was
Yeah.
feeling better and better in ways that I don't think I had words or realized even when we talked last. Like it's more of a new realization that the longevity of being a caregiver and the fact that my husband was diagnosed at 31 and I was 30, I spent more years in my marriage being a caregiver and helping him bucket list and full
Yeah.
of anxiety about tests and this and that. And like you can relate to that because you had a lot of caregiving in the end. It took away from living, like
Yeah.
true living. Now, I feel like we lived the best we could with our scenario, which I'm really proud of how we handle ourselves in that situation. But when I chose to move on or to start a new love, I felt like I had almost like started living for the first time, maybe ever, because
Yeah.
I literally couldn't remember a time before all the trauma and the fear. And
Yeah.
so my family, Carl's family, actually like it was definitely a path of all of us making choice about David. And it was not easy in the beginning. I mean, I think it was very awkward for holidays. And everybody would
Yeah.
come in with fear and crying. And there was a lot of crying. And then you're like, how are we all going to manage it? Even my kids, I think, were nervous about it because they were happy. We were happy, but we were all sad because that's how grief works. It's inside of you forever.
The first time I ever met Carl's parents, I'll never forget this, and I'm gonna go on a limb and say that Anthony probably feels this too. Like that feeling that you feel that he's a reminder that Ryan's not there. He feels that too. I felt that so intensely
Wow.
at little Kate's. Alix and I had been dating. We were getting serious.
You were proposing that month.
Yeah, I asked her to marry me the next month, and we went
next
to
week, actually.
we went to Kate's
First communion.
and I wore a suit, and I had never met him before.
David doesn't believe in God.
And I
showed
was
up at
sitting,
church.
I sat in the pew with Alix and Kate and Carr, and they were behind us, and I just felt all these.
Wow.
I mean, I cried a lot. Remember that?
Yeah, you cried a lot.
It really tore me up because
Wow.
I knew Carl should have been there, and like I'm not Catholic. I don't even believe in God. And I just had this overwhelming feeling like I shouldn't be there. And it felt, and I think they felt that way actually.
Well, they made such a good effort. Like we went to
They
dinner.
really tried, but
It was
you
just
could tell
hard.
I was just a continual reminder that their son was dead, and it was really, really hard. Now, given 6 months, a year, they kind of like saw the like right before Carl's dad died. He told me that he was so happy that Alix and I had gotten married, and that I was taking care of the grandkids, and he saw how happy they were and how good we were doing, and he told me that he was really happy.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure was really, really hard for him.
Yeah.
It touched me when he told me that, and it's still that he told me that.
I would say to anyone listening, or even to you, Whitney, because I know you're in your you guys have been together, but you're when you move into a home and start actually truly like dropping off at school and doing the parenting roles where there's like authority figures, whatever that even means. They were like, Anthony, who are you? Dad, boyfriend? Like people were just the constant questions. You're like, we're trying to figure it out. Thanks. My whole life was shattered a few years ago. I'm like trying to put the shit back together. I'll let you know when we've got it all sorted out. Thanks. But it's my in-laws and everyone who's meant to stay in our inner circle. The love that has developed, especially for Carl's mom, his dad passed, which is sad, and Carl's brother. I almost feel like our love is more authentic today than it has ever been. And they've always been an incredible support to me and always been so warm to me and love me for who I am. But in this moment, I think we all are just authentically ourselves. And it's been awesome. It will blossom. And those who are meant to sit at your table and be in your world will be in your world.
Yeah, it just takes it takes some time. It takes some time for the in-laws to fully grieve and to fully accept that. And
Betsy's parents have been, Betsy's mom has been amazing. Betsy's brother and his wife have been amazing. Everybody's trying. They're just, it's just uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for everybody in the beginning.
And the truth is, like, one of the like major tenets of widowdom is that the death is all about the living. It took me a long time to get that. Like, I used to feel really sorry for Betsy, and I felt sad that she wasn't there, and I wish she was here, and blah 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 blah. But she's not here. We're here. And grieving and death really is all. I mean, you can respect the people that died, and you can still feel their influence. But the truth is, surviving is about the survivor. And we're the survivors surviving, and it takes a lot of energy and a lot of wherewithal to. And I have met people that have not survived. That have really had had no help, no therapy, and they're not surviving. They're living the death forever. And that's just not a viable solution. Really. Well, actually, what you're doing, in my mind, is the solution.
It is, but what's crazy, and Whitney, tell me your thoughts on this, because it feels like it is the solution, and we know it's the solution. But the rest of the world who hasn't experienced this kind of loss, it's so jarring for them, because I'm not sure exactly what it's all about. It's got to be a threatening of internal safety, of like needing everything to be in this sort of like fairy tale land, where there's one love and one path. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it's like all of that. I mean, the messages I get where people are like, oh, I would never move on if my spouse died, or, or like saying like, oh, you must not have loved your husband, like stuff like that. I mean, that all comes from a place of insecurity, I think, and fear. I mean, because we don't really want to think about that happening to us, right? And I think it's just one of those things that you don't understand until you're in it. And like, I don't wish people to understand what it is like to feel the need for love again after you've lost like someone that you would probably call your soulmate, right? Like somebody that you wanted to spend your life with. Like Ryan is absolutely the love of my life. Like, but so is Anthony, like, because I'm living two different lives, right? And
That's
people
powerful.
people can't understand that because they feel like I have so much love for this person that's alive because they haven't suffered a loss. I don't I can't even imagine opening up my heart. Like there's no space left. But when you lose somebody, you realize there's so much space because you feel it. You feel the love for your spouse, but then you literally, when you meet somebody and you start falling in love with them, you realize like this duality of love and how much you can love and that it's just infinite, right? And it's not even just for a partner, it's like for your children, for, people in your community. I feel like I love so much more deeply now and just so much better than I did before because of
Yeah.
the loss
Your
that I
capacity to
went through.
love. I agree.
I think generally people underestimate, and I do too, underestimate your ability to love. You know, you just, I don't know why that is. I mean, I do that. I do that with animals. I'm like, I can't have any more. I can't.
You have too many dogs,
Right.
too many pets.
I can't
I love
love
animals.
another dog that's gonna die in 8 years or 9 years. But the truth is, you can.
You
You
can.
can and you
You
do.
can.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's really cool. Well, I wanted to ask you. So we had this week, obviously, David and I feel like your grief is kicking up. It's a little earlier than it happened last year, but his office was so sweet. Like one of his office members or staff members pulled him aside privately and asked him if it was okay if they decorated for Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Just knowing that was the anniversary of Betsy's death, which I thought was, he's got a great staff, but I was like so thoughtful, but it made him cry in appreciation. And it was interesting to think about the further out we get and the more of these anniversaries and milestones that we continue to go through, it's like, would it be lovely to imagine that we might get to a space where we can honor and love without all of the like heavy down? But I was wondering like how you guys are doing further along with more of your anniversaries coming up, how you're doing maybe on your anniversary coming up.
Yeah. I think so. So Ryan's accident was in October. So that would have been, it was the second year anniversary of his accident. And then the second anniversary of his death is coming up on April 7th. And it's just so weird. And then it was our anniversary, October 12th. So October, like the end of summer, I started to feel it. And it's so weird you talk about Valentine's Day, like decorations, because I'm sure that is such like a activation in your mind of your loss and your trauma, David. But for me, it's like the leaves changing because it happened in fall.
Yeah.
So when like the leaves start changing and I feel like the crispness of fall, I'm like, whoa, like it's coming. Like my body is just like, I know it's coming. And I struggled this year a lot. And I think as we get
year
more
two
mature,
is so hard. Don't you
it's
think?
hard.
I think year two is harder than year one. Just because I think the space, you're like, year one, you're like gripping and waiting for it to be terrible. And then year two, you're like, I think I'm going to be there. I'm better. Things are, like looking up or whatever. And then you're like, oh, like you go down even harder, I think.
Yeah, I think it's more unexpected because, it's not the same as acute grief where you're kind of in survival still, you're kind of numb, you're just like, you're just really just focusing on what's ahead of you and not really being able to feel as much as year two. And I think it was unexpected for me because my grief is different now. I'm not like in a ball crying in the corner, but I might like snap at my kids more and have more anxiety. And I'm like, what is this? Like, what is going on? And it's trauma. Like it's grief. It's my body remembers my nervous system during this time was in fight or flight. And I'm realizing that it's going to feel different every year. And just, I pour into the things that I know help me through that. And I encourage my clients to do the same, before anniversaries. I'm like, if I'm feeling anxious, I need to go for a walk. Like, I know that helps me. because there isn't going to be a time where we're not going to feel it. It's just going to be
I don't think
different.
so.
Yeah.
And just learning
I
what works
think
for us during those times.
that's what helps for me the most, is just not trying to not let it happen. Just let it happen.
Yeah.
And feel the grief. And I used to think, I mean, the first several anniversaries, I just had this overwhelming feeling of doom that I was going to die.
Uh-huh.
And if I let it in, that if I really let it
Mm-hmm.
in, and now and for Alix too, because we're in a new relationship, and sometimes your spouse can kind of feel a little bit less if you are
Yeah.
grieving the spouse that's not there. And so, I mean, luckily she's a wonderful partner and lets me feel all that stuff. And
But I'd be lying to say that it doesn't like get you a little bit activated. And it was that same YouTube channel, again, his name's Abel Kehoe, was talking about this. And it was like one of the topics I thought I'd bring up with us because it was so poignant. This week, David called me Betsy, which has happened,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times actually. And I've called him Carl. And I was like thinking, I wonder if Whitney ever calls Anthony Ryan, like either in an anger moment or like I mean, there's been lots of moments we've done that. And it's like, it does tend to be around like
it's hard, right?
grief moments. And then you're like, okay, so for double widows, sometimes it's like we're trying not to be, and maybe Anthony would be the right person to ask about it, but you get a little bit like, what? Like, I'm the person here doing the parenting, and then you also, like, because I'm a widow, I actually get it where I'm like, oh, you're just grieving right now. This is your subconscious, like your limbic system is on fire right now because February is right around the corner and your body's feeling it. And like, she is on his mind more than usual. And
Yeah.
in the early
That makes
days, I
sense.
think I was insecure. And now I'm like, still insecure if I'm honest, of course, but I've done enough self-work to say our love for our past spouses deserves to be celebrated. And they were wonderful people. The world won't allow us to, the world around us will not allow us to have two great loves. But the reality of life is that you can have two great loves. And
Yeah.
because one, maybe even because your second is even more, I think because of the experience of the loss, it's even more poignant, it's even more celebrated, it's even more felt. Like, I find this to be the great love of my life. But Carl was one of the most amazing people and my soulmate, and carried me through a time that I wouldn't be where I am today without him. He did things for my heart, my soul, and made me a mom. Like, so many things that he gave me I couldn't replace. And I know you feel the same about Ryan. But people can't give that to you. So then you internalize that and think, if you call me by her name, that must mean that you'd rather have her here than me, is like your innate drive. And then you have to like talk yourself out of it. So I was just wondering, have you guys experienced that at all?
Yeah, you know what? That's so, I've never even thought about that before. So I've never called Anthony Ryan, but I used to call Ryan Boo. And I don't call Anthony that. I call Anthony Babe. And one time I called Anthony Boo, and I was like, whoa, like that's weird, because I only ever called that to Ryan. That was like his special name. And what I don't know if Anthony noticed, he didn't say anything, but what I thought my brain was doing, which I actually find great comfort in, is that I called him that because it's like my brain was at a level of comfort that I only had with Ryan, and it was starting to get there with Anthony. And that's why I called him that, because I was with Ryan for 10 years. Like, the comfort with that, like my brain was just like, you can call him that because you're kind of getting into that mode where you kind of feel the same security as you did with Ryan. So I didn't honestly like overanalyze it too much, but I just thought it was interesting. I'm like, wow, like my brain went on autopilot for a second, but it must be because I'm finally settling into this life.
Yeah, that's something to celebrate, because I think it can be at least for us, it's been in multiple emotional states where I do think you're right. It's an autopilot emotional state that you're in where It hasn't always been positive on ours. Well, twice we were in a fight, and he was like, Betsy, and I was like, okay, you're fighting with me right now, and I'm going to kick your ass right now. But then I was like, I wish Betsy was here to defend your bad behavior.
Well, I would just say that I spent a lot of time in my first marriage not super present or mindful, and basically kind of dissatisfied and angry. Um, and sometimes that comes up. So when I get dysregulated, sometimes it puts me back in that spot that I was in for so long, and that definitely can trigger.
The brain is so amazingly powerful, and it's magnificent and also petrifying to be a part of a process of healing our brains after such significant loss. You get to witness it from various ages in our homes, both you and Anthony and David and I and our children, and it never ceases to amaze me how we want to be better. We want to be safe. We want to be okay.
Well, like you said about Anthony, if you're going to marry a widow, you're going to have to want to really be a worker and really be present, which is wonderful. Which is wonderful. But it takes, because you bring your own shit to the table, right? It's not like you're just dealing with, for us, you're not just having to be present for their grief. You've got your own grief and shit that you bring, and sometimes those two things can really spark off. But as long as we have the tools, luckily, and we continue to work on the tools so that we're gonna get dysregulated at the same time. It's gonna happen. That's just part of it. But we have the tools to communicate through it, which I think is
What's worked for you guys? Like, does Anthony get threatened by your grief? I think this is a normal thing, and does he talk to you about it, or is he more quiet about it and just let you have your space?
Yeah, what's so interesting is that I'm so quiet with my grief with him because I'm such an internal person that I'm like not the person to just be like crying in front of people. I'm like crying in my car by myself or on a run or something, and I process things like by myself or like in therapy or when I'm working out, like whatever. So for him, his problem was that I wasn't sharing enough, and he wanted me to like be open with him. So that's something I'm still working on, because he's like, I want to see like what's going on with you. Like, I don't want you to have to like suffer by yourself.
I'm so glad you said that. So one of the, I love it. Not love it. I don't love your grief, but I get a lot out of when she shares with me how she felt about Carl and their relationship, and like when we go through down memory lane, if you will, when she tells me, what he was doing when Carl was born and what he was doing, and it really helps kind of create the whole relationship. I feel much closer to her after she shares her grief with me, honestly, because I know it's going on. You can feel, if when you're close and you're in love, you can feel something is going on, and it's extremely helpful to hear what's going on. Which is we do therapy once a week together, and it's basically an opportunity for me to hear about her grief and about her concerns and about her all that stuff, and I can't tell you how helpful it is, because I feel the same exact thing, but sometimes we don't have the words to communicate them.
I tried to run away from David when we were dating, and he was like, just give me one therapy session together. And I was like, fine, because I was kind of a preacher on therapy to everyone, and so I was like, fine, I'll do it. And we've been going ever since, and I don't think we would have made it without it, because I also sometimes keep my love and my thoughts about Carl and like all these good memories inside of my heart, sort of because I feel like he was dying for so long that, like, I don't know, like I really want to be alive, and I feel like I don't have a ton of regrets. I have some big traumas that I dealt with, and a lot of very like violent things, which I'm sure I actually think you and I probably have that in common. Like, the medical trauma is so significant that
Yeah.
I almost don't want to be back in it, you know, and that was a longevity for us. And so the shorter part of our marriage was these like gorgeous moments of our family and the things we were building. But I don't know, like I want to be in the now, and I don't know why I don't go there. I don't feel a lot of regrets. I think I gave it, everything I had, and it was the best I had at the time. My skill set wasn't great. I think I did worse in other areas in my marriage.
Yeah, I just like hearing about it, and I bet Anthony would like hearing about it too. And it helps with the kids as well. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's very helpful, and to help me kind of know where the kids are coming from, and what they've been through and what they've seen. That's hard to relate to. You know, I've never taken care of a long-term cancer. I've never done that before, and it's hard for me to
Right.
even imagine it. But when they talk about it, and when she talks about it, it really helps me understand what she went through and where she came from, and it's very helpful. I mean, that's all.
Well, it must be hard because your boys are so little, you know, and it's like when they're little, you don't know how. I remember when mine were little and the grief was happening simultaneously, whether I was alive but dying, but I was always afraid of like how much to bring up or how much are we talking about. And like they kind of just drop it on you, and then you're in like fetal position, and then they're like, "Bye, go and play with my trucks," and you're like, "What? I'm literally, I'm falling apart. What's happening?"
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's interesting that because I think it's a different situation when you're both like a widow and a widower, and Anthony hasn't been through like that significant loss. So it's interesting to hear from you, Alix, that you act the same way as me, but I thought maybe you would want to be more open because he's gone through something similar, but I guess it really depends on the person. So it's interesting to hear that. Yeah, when it comes to kids, I mean, that's a whole other thing. It's like a whole other layer. And uh, Jackson was the one that experienced it because he was three, almost four when Ryan's accident happened. So, I think kind of going back to what you said before, like just like the extra love and extra attention, I feel like something that Anthony and I have trouble with a lot is I feel like I'm always like defending Jack. Like I need to protect him because he's the one that went through so much. And Anthony's like, no, like he's like needs discipline. Like he's still like a child. And I feel like part of me is like, but I need to go easy on him because he's been through so much. And like, that's hard.
I can relate to
we
that.
totally are in
We
that.
have the same problem.
Exact same.
And I think when it's the parent that's parenting that's not afraid of how much this has hurt them, and you always feel the fragility of that deep trauma and loss for them, and it's like that's the mother in us. You just want to make things easier on them, and like if I can give you any advice, don't do it because I did that for too long, and then like my son needs to feel life because unfortunately and fortunately he's a feeler, and so every time I try to catch him before he falls, it's never a good thing for him.
I think this is the major advantage of and this may be unpopular out there, I don't know, but the two-parent family, this is the advantage, and particularly as a step parent, is you have not unbiased, but as unbiased as possible, a third-party person who you love standing right next to you, telling you, I know, I understand how you feel, and I get what you need,
wrong.
but you are completely and totally wrong. And in fact, this behavior is going to propagate the problem.
Yeah.
And she does the exact same thing for my children. I mean, it's not one-sided by any stretch.
Guilt parenting, my therapist talks about this a lot. It's called guilt parenting, and you just are so sad for their loss, and you're also grieving, and you just want everything to be okay.
You want to protect them, everything be okay. And then from the outside,
we all go through that.
From the outside, you can see how unhealthy that is. From the inside, it seems all important.
Well, the universe doesn't make this any easier. Every time you go to school, we got Father's Day, and the dads are coming for dads and lunch, and moms and tea. Like everyone's always like, "Who's your mom? Who's your dad?" You're like, Jesus. And like when you're the anomaly kid in the class who does like, this is Anthony. He's my dad. My dad died. Like. That's how I'm going to start dad's luncheon at school or whatever the damn Father's Day crap that they do.
again, I seem to be chiming in with the positives of this.
You are.
Again. So my daughter, who's 19 in college, came from boarding school, but now she's in kind of a more general college, and she has told me that it's dawned on her with roommates and friends that what happened to us makes her different.
Yeah.
And it makes her, and she told me it makes her special. Like she is starting to realize that what happened to us really separates her in a way from all the other, because she was like, my roommate has two parents that have jobs, and
they don't even know they have anxiety. They don't have
Right.
words for their
Right,
feelings
right,
because they've
right.
never had a panic attack. And she's like, I'm having a panic attack because her nervous system, her mom died quickly. And it's just interesting. I was like, damn, that's something we don't think now. You're in the parenting process. You don't know. And looking at Kate, sometimes I'm like, she's magnificent. And she's had to work really hard.
She's not wrong at all. I mean, in my mind, she's totally right. She is different.
Yeah.
We're always going to be different. And that's okay.
It's actually kind of cool if you ever meet kids who lost a parent at a young age who are adults. They get it. I mean, they just get it. They laser right into the center of the heart of everything. And you're like, oh, you're special. Like, you see the world for the fragility that it is, and you love big. And that's, I think that's like that double-edged sword of the terrible things they've had to experience, but the ripple into the world because of people like our children is really special. The world needs more people that feel
it
that
really
big.
is. I mean, it's a nuclear bomb of conflict, right? It's not it's not wrecking your car. It's a nuclear bomb, but it's still, just like all conflict and trauma that I have learned, is an opportunity, and it behooves us to take that opportunity and be better. And
I mean, we don't have a lot of options. Well, we can't stay still anymore, and we can't be in our old life. Like, that's the thing about mindfulness. It's complicated, but it's simple, right? That all we have is our now. Our past is a part of us forever, and this new version of us will carry those parts of us forever, I read something about DNA, like we breathe in the DNA of our loved ones and they stay inside of our body forever. And I was thinking, like, Betsy and Carl and Ryan are inside of us and inside of our children forever, and I'm like, but it's our responsibility to live our own unique path, and that now includes David, his children, Anthony, your children, your new home, your new version of where you're going. And I think that freaking YouTube knocked me out, because I was thinking, we really need people to understand how fucking hard this is on a day-to-day basis, how hard Anthony is working. Before you open your big fat trapper trolls on her page, thankfully people don't troll because we're both widows. Like, but we, I get trolling. It's just different. It's more like in these weird funeral settings or like at weddings. Like, people will make these nasty comments, and I'm like, did anyone hear that? Oh my God, yes. Like, oh yeah. I heard somebody say one time, and we were at a restaurant in Alexandria where he lived, and where his wife passed away. They're both very prominent doctors in the city. And he left, and we were running to therapy, and the lady who ran this restaurant or whatever was working at the restaurant. David ran out and was like, I'm going to grab a tea. So I ran to the drink station, like, got a refill on my iced tea. And she's like, you know who that was? Yeah, that's David Long. That's his new young girlfriend. She's just only after him for his money. His wife's barely been dead. And I literally leaned my head around the corner and was like, and I was thinking to myself, and at that time I used to get so pissed. Like, Anthony didn't even have this. I'm like, I'm a fucking widow too, bitch. Like, I lost my husband. Look me up. But I'm like, why do I need to defend myself? I shouldn't even have to be a widow to be standing in these shoes. And I just want the world sort of to hear our perspective of, like, every day we have to get up and we have to choose to love again. And we're lucky enough to find partners who are, like, sitting in it and want to embrace it. And our kids are better because of it. And then when other people who've never put their damn feet in our shoes and never had a loss of this magnitude try to judge it, I was feeling emphatic about it. I always get emphatic when I see people writing nasty shit on your page. I'm like, here's my rant for all those people on your page, because I feel personal towards it to you, and I feel personal towards it towards us and any widow out there or anyone who's been in loss. Like, leave us alone. We didn't choose this, and we are lucky enough to have love again, and our kids are doing well. Mind your own business. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think it's so amazing. I talked with a client about this the other day because it's just inevitably you're going to like come against that resistance from society, and like you feel like eyeballs are on you like all the time. Like, what is she doing? Is she too happy? Is she too sad? Like, you know, I feel like we lose our spouse, and then suddenly everyone feels like we aren't competent to make like big girl and big boy decisions anymore. Like, we've lost our ability to think. Like, you know, I have a JD. Like, I was an attorney for practice law for 10 years. Like, I'm smart. Like, my husband died. I didn't lose like my brain cells. Like, I still can be able to make decisions. Like, if I want to date, it's because I want to for whatever reason. Like, you don't get to determine when I'm ready. Like, what the hell does that mean anyway? I mean, and
Well,
I love
right.
when
Like,
people,
can't we just say, are we ever ready? What we're talking about right here is that you're still grieving while parenting. You're still grieving. Or, I mean, I got called Betsy this week. Like, I'm right here, Valentine's Day. Do I make Valentines for my kids? Do I not? Do I even act like the holiday exists? Like, you're holding hands in his grief walk when it's not, and he's holding my hand in my grief walk. And it's like, that's how we live. And it's not what people think. There's not a home wrecker. There's not a
no,
young Anthony coming on in trying to take your husband's role who's barely dead. Like, I'm like, these people need to hush it.
I know. And what I find is like so hysterical is that, you know, the people that make comments like, oh, you're in like a vulnerable position, like make sure. I'm like, don't you think that like I'm just so offended by people that just don't understand like
We're like,
that.
vulnerability is the space you should be loving from, by the way, dumbasses. Like, if you're not in a vulnerable space in your life, then I don't know what you're doing, but it sounds like you're probably sleepwalking. And that's the opposite of where widows want to be, because we know
Yeah,
how fragile life is.
I had people tell me
Yeah.
when I told them we were dating, you know, and
Oh, yeah.
I said, oh, she's wonderful.
She's a widow.
She's a widow, and they go, oh, you don't need to get into all that, do you? I mean,
Oh my
that's
God.
yeah. And
I mean, it
But
kind of
I feel
wasn't all that, but
no, but I feel like you guys have, because you both have experienced significant losses, like you can both understand each other on a level that, you know, Anthony can't understand that on the same level. So it's like a different dynamic. I think it's
that
harder
is
in
different.
different ways.
for
Like, it's
sure.
just I feel like it would be hard for me to be in grief and then have somebody else be grieving like at different times, and it's like, when do we sync up? And that sounds very complex to me, but then it is also complex to have somebody that hasn't suffered a significant loss too, but for different reasons. But also it's also
Yeah.
kind of like nice because I get to take a break from it because he hasn't. I don't need to tend to
Right.
his grief, which is a totally different
Yeah.
experience than you guys have. So it's just
The
interesting.
multiple grievers in our house can get to be a lot. We do some more therapy than I'd like to admit.
Well, I mean, one other thing I've learned grieving is that everybody grieves. Everybody has experienced loss. Now, not as, you know, traumatic as ours maybe. But I mean, I grieve the loss of my first puppy dog. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds ridiculous, but the truth is,
No,
it
no,
made a
it's
huge
sweet.
Me
impact.
too.
It made a huge impact on me as a kid, and I still think about it. You know, and
Your grandmother. You think about your
my
grandmother.
grandmother, I think about my grandmother a lot. You know, and she was 97, so it's different, but it's
Yeah.
still everybody has. And this is something my therapist told me. Like, even though, and we've talked about this in the show before, even though we know everybody we know is going to die, we're just fantastically unprepared for it.
But we
You know what
also
I mean?
pretend
Yeah.
like it's not happening to
And
us until it does.
and we pretend like it's never going to happen. You
Yeah.
know?
Well,
Yeah.
talk a tad about your book that you're not supposed to be talking about, because I think it's like,
Yeah.
you know, in the process of being out there. And we'll finalize on just saying like Whitney again is like the best grief coach in the planet because she's walked the walk. And I think that that's really important. You need people who understand that there's no one right way, to doing this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. And, I did just finish writing my second book. My first book was more of like what happened to me. And, I wanted people to feel really seen in a very traumatic and like agonizingly painful experience because I felt so alone when I was going through it. So that's really for people to feel seen in any dark place that they're in. My second book is really like, this is what I did to get my life back. And like, these are the tools and strategies that I use in order to do that. And like implement, it's not a how to, it's like implement what you feel resonates with you and is authentic to your journey, throw away the rest. But like, I think there's going to be something for everyone in it that will resonate with them. And I think it's really powerful because there's so much complexity to this experience. And I think where people get stuck and where there's resistance is it's so overwhelming and they don't know where to start. So my second book kind of divides it into different aspects that I feel like are the most important when you're rebuilding your life and creating a life after loss. And so it's more digestible for people to be able to look at it and say like, I want to really read about like identity after, finding my new identity after I lose my person, like, and they can go to that and read what I did in order to do that.
Well, this book sounds like I would have given anything for that kind of a book after Carl died because I hunted and hunted and hunted. There was nothing. I think the closest book that someone gave me was like the Hot Widows Guide, maybe.
The Hot Young Widows
She was good.
Club.
Yeah, yes, the Hot Widows Club. She was great. Like she was the first young like voice that I was like, thank God. Like she said it. She said the things that we're all thinking, and so I love that about you. I love how brave you are. I love that you say what's on our mind. Often you say, I'm getting better. Each podcast we do together, I'm like, I'm done with the bullshit of hiding and being nice because like I'm pissed at your trolls, as you could hear today, and I want to defend our families. I want to defend our new life. I think that I'm tired of people who have no idea what they're talking about. It's like a Brene Brown. If you're not in the ring fighting the fight that we're fighting, please keep your mouth shut or at least bring it to me in a polite way. Don't talk behind my back about it because I'm happy to have an open dialogue with you about what it looks like to be us. And I'm going to keep defending it. I'm going to defend us.
It's super cool that you want to share, that. I feel that drive as well to like, I remember thinking this maybe a year ago that I felt like I was privy to some secret knowledge, and that maybe somebody out there could benefit at least a little bit. And maybe even somebody that, and this is something I've learned doing this podcast, is there's a lot of people out there that have not experienced the trauma like we have, but they can still benefit from the same tools and techniques that we use to survive. They're actually applicable for people that drink too much or people that don't know how to have sex with their spouse or whatever, people that are scared. It's extremely valuable information. And I wish like hell, I would have known even an inkling of it in my prior life. I know I would have been a better husband and a better parent, and maybe even a better doctor, frankly.
It's
so
beautiful.
I feel that I feel like you that we need to, and some people can't hear it. Some people can hear a little bit.
Should we make
Some people can
a
get it
widow's
all.
chant? We need like a widow's cheer.
Yeah.
Widows unite.
And I think it's cool that I think it's super cool that you spend energy getting it out there for people that might need it. It's wonderful.
Me too.
It's really
well.
great.
You're my favorite guest ever. Sorry, other guests.
Well,
She's my favorite. But I like to have
you.
other people who've walked our walk, and I'm so proud of Anthony. I am his biggest fan and cheerleader, and
that's great.
I guess my recommendation would be, don't do what I do. Open up, or make him go to therapy with you because I think my therapist forces me to be like, let's talk about how much you and Carl loved each other, like that kind of stuff, and like opens me up, and I think
and I think having never met him, if he loves you the way it sounds like he really loves you, the way I love Alix, I promise you, he wants to know.
Well, and we better just get in bed with our significant others because literally that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Like Carl is a part of my children, and now David is their father and who is raising them. And so it's like we're all married in one big old happy family, and you guys are all one big family, and that's just where we're going.
I know.
Whether the world can understand it.
Yeah.
Well, we love you, and we are so excited. I'll be the first person to purchase your book. Let me know when we can buy it.
I can't wait.
And I'm always trying to do collabs with you. I took a little bit of a hiatus there for a minute because I'm building this app, and it's taking much longer than I anticipated.
Oh my gosh. I think everything takes longer than what we anticipate, but I'm sure it'll be worth it, and I'll be excited. I will be your biggest cheerleader when it comes out. And thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you for being on. Hug the family
you,
and keep posting about your babies. I think baby Leo makes my morning like just better every time I see that. Their little walk into school makes me want another baby every single day. So.
Well, thank you guys. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, bye, Whitney. Thank you.
All right.
This has been Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long. Be sure to check out other episodes where our community of experts share tools and ideas to help you wake to the life inside of you. If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.